Welcome back to Mad Hatter's Civil War history. The roads leading to Atlanta were lined with exhausted soldiers, shattered hopes, and the future of the Confederacy itself. In the summer of 1864, one man was given a chance to change the course of the war. His name was John Bell Hood. Young, fearless, and wounded in service, Hood believed that victory belonged to those willing to strike first. On July 20th, 1864, he launched his first offensive as Army commander at Peachtree Creek. The result was a fierce battle of courage, confusion, and missed opportunities that helped determine the fate of Atlanta and the South. This is that story. The Battle of Peachtree Creek, fought on July 20th, 1864, was one of the most significant engagements of the Atlanta campaign and marked the first major action undertaken by General John Bell Hood after assuming command of the Confederate Army of Tennessee. The battle occurred at a critical moment for the Confederacy. Atlanta was one of the South's most important industrial and transportation centers, and its loss would have devastating military and political consequences. Hood's appointment reflected growing frustration in Richmond with General Joseph E. Johnston's strategy of retreat and defense. What followed at Peachtree Creek would reveal both the strengths and the weaknesses of Hood's aggressive leadership style and foreshadow the costly campaigns that ultimately led to the fall of Atlanta. John Bell Hood's rise to command was remarkable. A Kentucky native and West Point graduate, Hood was never known for academic brilliance, but he quickly gained a reputation for fearlessness and aggressive battlefield leadership. During the Civil War, he rose rapidly through the ranks, earning praise for his performance during the 7 Days battles, Second Manassas, and other major engagements. His bravery came at a terrible personal cost. At Gettysburg in 1863, an artillery shell permanently disabled his left arm. Just months later, at Chickamauga, a gunshot wound shattered his right leg, which had to be amputated. Despite these crippling injuries, Hood returned to service and became one of the Confederacy's most celebrated fighting generals. While recovering in Richmond, Hood cultivated influential relationships, particularly with Confederate President Jefferson Davis. At the same time, he quietly criticized the leadership of General Joseph Johnston. As Sherman's armies pushed steadily south through Georgia in the spring and summer of 1864, Johnston repeatedly withdrew rather than risk major battles. Although his strategy preserved the Army of Tennessee, it alarmed Confederate leaders who feared Atlanta would be surrendered without a serious fight. Hood's private correspondence reinforced those concerns, portraying Johnston as overly cautious and unwilling to seize the initiative. By mid-May, Johnston had fallen back across the Chattahoochee River, the last major natural barrier protecting Atlanta. Sherman skillfully crossed upstream, while Confederate resistance remained surprisingly weak. Union troops waded, swam, and even crossed the river nearly half naked in places, securing bridgeheads with minimal opposition. As Johnston continued his retreat, President Davis lost confidence entirely. On July 17, 1864, he removed Johnston from command and promoted Hood to full general, placing him in charge of the Army of Tennessee. Many observers understood exactly why Hood had been selected. Even those who doubted his abilities knew he would attack. General Robert E. Lee praised Hood's courage, but questioned whether he possessed the broader qualities needed for Army command. Union General John Schofield, who had known Hood at West Point accurately predicted Hood would strike aggressively before Sherman expected it. Hood himself embraced the offensive philosophy associated with Lee and Stonewall Jackson, believing bold attacks could still reverse Confederate fortunes despite the changing realities of warfare. Ironically, Johnston shared with Hood a plan he had never fully communicated to Davis. He intended to attack Major General George H. Thomas's Army of the Cumberland as it crossed Peachtree Creek north of Atlanta. Hood adopted the basic concept but modified it. Instead of striking during the crossing, he would attack after the Union troops had crossed, but before they could properly organize and entrench. The plan was risky, but it offered the possibility of crushing a significant portion of Sherman's army. The Confederate strategy relied on exploiting a gap between Thomas's left flank and the forces of Schofield and McPherson farther east. Hood ordered Lieutenant General William J. Hardee and Major General A.P. Stewart to launch the main assault against Thomas. Meanwhile, Major General Benjamin Cheatham, supported by cavalry and militia, was tasked with containing Federal forces approaching Atlanta from Decatur. If successful, Hardee and Stewart would drive Thomas back toward the angle created by Peachtree Creek and the Chattahoochee River, trapping and potentially destroying it. The plan looked promising on the morning of July 20th. Thomas's men were still crossing the creek and had not fully established defensive positions. Sherman himself believed any Confederate attack would likely fall farther east against Schofield or McPherson. Yet, almost immediately, Hood's operation began to unravel. Cheatham's position proved inadequate, requiring a major realignment of Confederate forces. As Cheatham shifted south, Hardee and Stewart were forced to move as well to maintain contact. Delays mounted throughout the day. What was supposed to begin at 1 p.m. did not start until approximately 3:30. Those lost hours proved crucial. Although many Federal units remained incompletely deployed, they used the delay to construct breastworks, barricades, and defensive positions. Union soldiers had become highly skilled at field fortifications, and even a few hours dramatically strengthened Thomas's line. When the Confederate attack finally began, Hardee's corps struck the Union left. By chance, the Confederate movements had extended his line beyond the Federal flank, creating an opportunity. Major General William Bates's division was supposed to exploit that opening, but dense undergrowth and difficult terrain prevented it from locating the vulnerable flank. As a result, the intended enveloping attack never materialized. Instead, Major General William H.T. Walker's division assaulted directly along Peachtree Road. Marching into well-positioned Federal defenses manned by Brigadier General John Newton's division, Walker's troops faced devastating musketry and artillery fire. Union soldiers who had been digging moments before dropped their entrenching tools and delivered a crushing volley. Confederate attacks repeatedly stalled under the weight of concentrated gunfire and canister. Walker gained little ground and suffered significant losses, including the mortal wounding of Brigadier General Clement Stevens. To Walker's left, Stewart's corps launched equally determined attacks. Brigadier General Winfield Scott Featherton's Mississippians crossed rugged ravines and dense vegetation before smashing into a gap between Union positions. For a brief moment, they drove parts of Brigadier General William Ward's division backward and threatened to break the Federal line. However, Featherton received no support from neighboring Confederate commands. Union forces quickly recovered, poured deadly fire into the exposed flanks, and forced a retreat. The losses were staggering. Featherton's brigade alone suffered over 600 casualties, with some regiments losing more than 3/4 of their engaged strength. A similar pattern unfolded elsewhere across the battlefield. Brigadier General Thomas Scott's Confederate brigade struck the forces of Brigadier General John Geary with tremendous force. One New Jersey regiment was caught completely by surprise and overwhelmed in a violent attack at close range. Confederate soldiers even captured the regiment's state colors. Geary later described the advancing Southern lines as magnificent, their officers galloping forward with sabers drawn and battle flags waving. Yet, despite their initial success, Scott's men lacked sufficient numbers and support to exploit the breakthrough. Union commanders reacted quickly. Major General Joseph Hooker personally helped rally disorganized troops and establish a coherent defensive line. Artillery positioned on commanding ground unleashed devastating fire into the advancing Confederates. Shells, case shot, and canister tore through attacking formations. Several batteries were temporarily overrun, but rallying infantry and supporting guns drove the Confederates back. Further west, Stewart's division, under Brigadier General Edward Walthall, attacked near Howard's Mill Road. Union soldiers, who had been resting, playing cards, and discussing rumors of Atlanta's imminent fall, suddenly found themselves scrambling into battle. Once again, Confederate troops achieved local successes and created moments of alarm with the Federal ranks. Fierce musketry, close combat, intense heat, and punishing terrain characterized the fighting. Nevertheless, Union troops repeatedly recovered, shifted positions, and delivered effective flank fire against advancing Southern formations. By nightfall, the outcome was clear. Although portions of the Union line had bent and temporarily broken, Thomas's army held its ground. Confederate assaults had displayed tremendous courage, but lacked coordination. Several divisions attacked piecemeal rather than simultaneously. Hardee never fully committed important reserves, including elements of Patrick Claiborne's renowned division. Opportunities to exploit temporary breakthroughs went unused. The Confederates had inflicted severe pressure, but failed to achieve decisive results. The battle cost the Union about 2,000 casualties. Confederate losses exceeded 2,500. More importantly, Hood had failed to destroy Thomas's army or halt Sherman's advance. Union forces remained firmly positioned north of Atlanta and continued tightening their grip on the city. In the aftermath, Hood and Stuart blamed Hardee for failing to attack with significant vigor. Hardee, who had expected consideration for Army command himself, may have harbored resentment toward his younger superior. Whether personal tensions influenced battlefield performance remains debated, but Confederate coordination was undeniably poor. Yet responsibility extended beyond Hardee. Hood himself had not remained close enough to supervise the battle's execution and underestimated how quickly Federal troops could fortify their positions. Peachtree Creek established a pattern that would define Hood's command. Rather than preserving his army behind defenses, he repeatedly sought decisive offensive victories. 2 days later, he launched another attack east of Atlanta. 6 days after that came the Battle of Ezra Church. Additional offensives followed at Jonesboro. Each attack produced heavy casualties, and none succeeded in halting Sherman's advance. By September of 1864, Atlanta's remaining supply lines had been severed. Hood was forced to abandon the city. In just 6 weeks of command, the Army of Tennessee suffered approximately 17,000 casualties. The loss of Atlanta electrified the North, revitalizing Union morale, and greatly strengthened Abraham Lincoln's re-election prospects. Southern hopes for a negotiated peace faded dramatically. Hood's subsequent Tennessee campaign only deepened the disaster. His catastrophic assault at Franklin shattered much of the Army of Tennessee, and the defeat at Nashville soon afterward effectively ended both the Army's effectiveness and Hood's military career. The Battle of Peachtree Creek therefore occupies a pivotal place in Civil War history. It represents Hood's first opportunity to justify Jefferson Davis's faith in his aggressive leadership. The battle demonstrated the courage of Confederate soldiers and the resilience of Union forces, but it also revealed the dangers of boldness untempered by caution. Hood had been chosen because he would fight. At Peachtree Creek, he did exactly that. Yet the battle also showed why audacity alone could no longer save the Confederacy. As one observer later concluded, Hood was always bold, but he was never wary. Thanks for watching this episode of Mad Hatter's Civil War History. Like, follow, and click the bell for notifications to ensure you see all of the latest content. As always, let me know if there's any other important events of the American Civil War you would like me to address.